to Zoom.
Distinguished colleagues, members of the Senate of the 14th Congress of this once proud and great republic, ladies and gentlemen, I stand on a matter of personal and collective privilege. In a press conference called by the Senate President inside his office last Tuesday, he virtually declared war against some of his colleagues, this representation included. Mr. President, if you are telling us to bring it on, just like a confident poker player with winning cards would say, and now I say to you, all in. There is an Indian proverb that goes like this: tell me a fact and I will learn. Tell me the truth and I will believe. Tell me a story and it will live forever in my heart. Ladies and gentlemen of this august chamber, these are the facts. On page 563 of the 2008 General Appropriations Act, under the DPWH budget item B.1.8.G, 200 million pesos was appropriated for the construction of the President Carlos P. Garcia Avenue extension from South Luzon Expressway to Sucat Road in Parañaque City, including right-of-way. On page 646 of the same budget book, under the same heading for DPWH budget, item B.H.7, another 200 million pesos was appropriated for the extension of C5 Road, including right-of-way. C5 Road is what we formerly called President Carlos P. Garcia Avenue. The project covers the same stretch, also from the South Luzon Expressway to Sucat Road in Parañaque City. Distinguished colleagues, please allow me to very simply describe these two appropriations. One is to extend Carlos P. Garcia Avenue from South Luzon Expressway to Sucat Road in Parañaque City, including right-of-way. The other is to extend C5 Road from South Luzon Expressway to Sucat Road in Parañaque City, including right-of-way. Masterful? Maybe. Neat? Well, almost. Carlos P. Garcia Avenue and C5 Road are one and the same, and so is everything else that precedes and follows. You need not be an expert on the national budget to find malice in this situation. Only a keen eye and a strong motivation to pull this country out of the deep pits of corruption. This is the truth. During the first Development Budget Coordinating Council hearing on the national budget for 2009 last Monday morning, I pointed out to DBM Secretary Rolando Andaya Jr. the redundant appropriation, even as I asked him to explain why there is such double entry. After consulting with his staff for about 10 minutes, he came back to his seat and said, and I quote, "Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, it was on account of a congressional insertion." I then challenged him that since he was accusing Congress of a double entry in the budget, he should at least initiate legal proceedings against whoever is the culprit, regardless of whether he or she is an administration ally or from the opposition. At that very moment, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I had absolutely no idea as to who authored the so-called congressional insertion. Secretary Andaya, who I thought would know, did not want to name the legislator concerned. Being an investigator for many, many years, my instinct was to identify the project proponent from among the members of both houses of Congress. Looking for evidence, in this case, is a no-brainer. Just look for the billboard in the project site, and I would get the answer. And so, before last Monday's session started, I asked a member of my staff to go to the construction site to find out whose billboard was there to announce and own up to the Carlos P. Garcia, also known as C5 Road Extension Project. The billboard structure was there, all right, but the billboard itself was recently torn down. According to some tricycle drivers plying the route who were interviewed, the billboard belonged to the Senate President. I simply followed the narrow trail and it led me to you, Mr. Senate President. No political motive whatsoever. Walang kinalaman ang iyong pagtakbo sa 2010, nor with your Senate presidency. Anyway, that exchange of words during the DBCC hearing between this representation and Secretary Andaya regarding the issue of double entry in the 2008 budget book came out in the early evening news of several radio and television stations last Monday, with the Budget Secretary even claiming credit for the discovery of the double entry and vowed to impound the second 200 million appropriation. Never mind that, Mr. President. What is clear and important here is the fact that there is indeed a double entry in this year's national budget of 200 million pesos each for the same stretch of road. This is not all, distinguished colleagues. On page 564 of the 2008 GAA, again, under the DPWH budget, item B.1.A.C, for the widening of Governor's Drive, otherwise known as the Carmona Dasmariñas 13 Martires Road, including bridges. A seemingly innocent funding of 50 million pesos was allotted for point C, which is Aguinaldo Bridge in Cavite. But I found on page 646 of the same budget book, under the same heading for DPWH budget, under the same section for locally funded projects, and under point H.6 provides 50 million pesos, again, for the repair and rehabilitation of, you guessed it right, Aguinaldo Bridge in Cavite. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, something odd struck me in the 2008 General Appropriations Bill. In my 7 years in Congress, this is probably the first time that I have encountered two versions of the House bill, namely House Bill 2454, the red and the black, the left and the right. Another case of double entry, perhaps. What gives? Take the case of the DPWH budget. In GAB 1 or HB 2454, red version, locally funded projects in the DPWH budget received a total appropriation of 52,648,923,000 pesos. But in GAB B or General Appropriations Bill 2 or HB House Bill 2454 black version, the appropriation ballooned to a whopping 65,461,538,000 pesos, with a difference of close to 13 billion pesos. In the Senate version of the bill, an increase of 3.95 billion pesos was further proposed, which eventually became item H, urgent infrastructure, including local projects under the 2008 General Appropriations Act. The following line budget items are the insertions made in the Senate. Number 1, Kibawe, Kadingilan, Kalinangan Road, 5 million, and Don Carlos, Kadingilan Road, 25 million, both in Bukidnon. Construction, number 2, construction of access road, West Lateral Dike, connecting to Hacienda Dolores, Porac Interchange of the Subic-Clark-Tarlac Expressway, 100 million pesos. Number 3, for the completion of the Cagayan de Oro International Trade and Convention Multipurpose Center, 100 million pesos. Tagaytay Silang Road, Balalang Matanda Section, 13 million pesos. Construction of Molino Boulevard in Cavite, including right-of-way, 37 million pesos. And as I mentioned earlier, the construction of the C5 road extension from SLEX to Sucat, including right-of-way, 200 million. This is the first discovered double entry. And Aguinaldo Bridge, 50 million. This is possibly the second discovered double entry. And to continue, 200 million pesos for Maharlika Road. God knows which part. Also included in the Senate insertions are these lump sum appropriations. 1, repair and rehabilitation, including improvement of safety standards of various roads along public schools, 100 million. Number 2, flood control and drainage system, 500 million pesos. Number 3, construction, repair, and rehabilitation of government facilities, including educational facilities, 760 million pesos. Number 4, rehabilitation, reconstruction of damaged paved national roads generated from payment management system, highway development and management nationwide, 50 million pesos. Number 5, road upgrading, gravel to concrete, based on gravel road, strategies, traffic benchmark for upgrading to paved road standard nationwide, 50 million pesos. And over and above all this, Mr. President, without any specification and merely lumped as various infrastructure projects, there is a lump sum of 1.76 billion. Saan kaya mapupunta ang ganito kalaking halaga? At sino ang magdedesisyon kung anong proyekto ang bibiyayaan ng lump sum na ito? Pagdating sa Bicameral Conference Committee, ang 3.95 billion pesos na iminungkahing idagdag ng Senado ay naging mahigit 4.1 billion pesos. Lalo pang lumaki. Why? Because under item H, described as other national public works, local infrastructure projects, the biggest lump sum of 1.76 billion pesos almost doubled to 3,426,500,000 pesos. Another lump sum appropriation outside the Senate insertions were discovered in the 2008 budget. Page 657, A-3.A.1.D, amounting to 2,001,850,000 pesos, and point E, 4 billion pesos. Under point A, point 3, an amount of 7,981,561 or 565 million was appropriated. Of this amount, 546,653,000 pesos was already appropriated as lump sum for projects nationwide under this category. An analysis of the insertion made in the General Appropriations Act of 2008 will reveal that under item H, point 9, there is another amount of 50 million pesos appropriated for the same. Para saan na naman kaya ang dagdag na ito? So not only do we have double entries in the line budget items, Mr. President, we also have double entries in the lump sum appropriations. Hence, total lump sum appropriations in the 2008 budget of the DPWH alone amounted to 23,467,383,000 pesos. Make no mistake, Mr. President, hindi natin minamasama ang congressional insertions, lalo na kung ang hangarin ay makapagbigay ng tamang serbisyo sa ating mga kababayang nangangailangan. Subalit, kung ito ay gagawin upang mapaboran ang iilan at madagdagan ang pagkakakitaang proyekto, ito ang dapat nating tutulan. There is nothing wrong with insertions per se, Mr. President. These are special interests of lawmakers for their advocacies and constituents. In fact, even in the preparation of what is called the President's Budget or the National Expenditure Program, powerful members of Congress are already able to get their pet projects included in the department's budgetary proposals. And in the deliberations on the appropriations bill in the House and the Senate and the powerful bicameral conference committee, so-called congressional insertions are made. But what is abominable are the malicious double entries of 200 million pesos and possibly 50 million pesos using different names for identical projects. Distinguished colleagues, let me go on with more of the truth. The Budget Secretary during the DBCC hearing admitted that we generated substantial savings every fiscal year out of the annual nationwide budget for personal services or PS, from a low of 80 billion out of a PS budget of 250 billion in 2002 to a high of 177 billion out of a PS budget of 366 billion in 2007. Kung ganito pala kalaki ang hindi nagagastos taon-taon sa personal services, bakit kailangan pa ng VAT na nagpapahirap sa taong bayan? Ang sagot ng Budget Secretary, ginagamit daw ito para sa Christmas bonus ng mga kawani ng pamahalaan. If this is true, Mr. President, then the unused portion of the budgeted PS should have enabled the government to dole out bonuses to our teachers, policemen, and soldiers, not only in December, but every month of the year. Ilan na kayang beses lumampas sa ating pagsusuri ang ganito? Nangyayari kaya ito taon-taon? Balikan natin at tunghayan ang nangyari sa budget ng Department of Agrarian Reform noong taong 2007. In the regular budget of the Office of the